We have a great episode for you today. I'm so excited to be back talking with different people that have been recipients of past Christian Teacher of the Year awards with the Herzog Foundation. This is something that has been a pretty cool thing to watch evolve over the last 3 years. We're heading into our third year with recipients getting to travel to DC, getting to come to the Herzog Foundation to visit. And this has just been a real treat to get to watch how it's evolved, but then also get to welcome back past recipients of these awards. And today we are here with multiple recipients, getting to talk with them, see where they're at. This is a great opportunity for you if you have not gone back and listened to past episodes. This is an awesome one to go back and pick from last year and even the year before, kind of see what teachers are doing across the country within the realm of Christian education. And our first, we called him a tribute earlier, our first guest today is Kyle Rapinchuk, who is with us out of Arkansas. We had a great conversation with him last year, and I'm so excited to welcome you back today. You get to be the first out of the gate with us,
yes.
An early morning, early visit. So glad to have you. How are you doing?
We'll doing
start
really
there.
well.
We'll start there.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back. It was such a joy to be here last year. I was excited to have an invitation to return this year and have the opportunity to talk with you. So thanks so much for your time.
You know, it's one of the things coming back year after year or inviting people back to kind of come together really, I think, enforces something that I think the Herzog Foundation finds very important, which is the idea of a cohort,
yes.
Pulling people together. What are you seeing with your having, been part of it last year, coming back this year? How is that cohort concept or idea being developed among people that you did meet last year, that you're going to meet this year? What is, and I'm asking as somebody in the background who knows it's happening, but doesn't know the logistics. So how does that work?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to come up here last summer and meet some of the award recipients from 2023. And then the wonderful opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. For the awards gala. Yeah. But then throughout the year have had opportunities to actually interact with some of the people I met through the Excellence in Christian Teacher Award. And so Joe Cox that was here last year had an opportunity to invite him to a conference that I was running in March. And he came down and we had an opportunity to spend some time together and kind of go through the conference at that. And Diane Carter, another award recipient last year, saw her at the annual Association of Classical and Christian Schools conference in Atlanta just whatever it was, 4 or 5 weeks ago. And so knowing those people that I've had the opportunity to meet through this organization and through this award has been really neat to see these people in different contexts throughout the year. To have encouragement, friendship, and then coming back even last night and seeing so many of the people that I spent a couple of days with last year was really exciting to catch up and see what they're all doing.
I would bet. I do think that's neat. As a former teacher, it is always fun. You kind of feel like that coming home, old school,
yes.
You're like going back and you're
yes.
reminiscing. And that was always a fun piece of teaching for me, was just those continued ongoing relationships, especially things like conferences and, where have you been? Oh my gosh. And,
yes.
doing the catch up. So I think it's something neat that Herzog is doing. And I don't know of many other organizations really doing that across the country where it's a continual, I want to say kind of revolving door, but not, because you're circling back to the same concepts, but yet expanding out to other people, to bring them into the fold, which I think is amazing.
Yes.
So your background, we talked a little bit about this in our episode last year where we spoke with you, but tell me I know it's kind of hard to give that 30,000 foot view, but if you can tell me a little bit about your education experience as a teacher, kind of where you've been and where you're at now, because I think yours was a story that stuck with us last year. And when I saw your name on the list for this year, I was like, ooh, I get to talk to him again. So tell us a little bit about that, kind of where you're at and where you're headed this year.
Yeah, so the 30,000 foot fast forward view is really that I was in seminary. My wife and I were raising 3 young kids and figuring out what the Lord had for us and felt a call to teaching, but always thought that was going to be in the college classroom. And so as I was working on a PhD, we were also teaching part-time at College of the Ozarks, getting some experience there. And at that time, we were also trying to figure out what are we going to do for our kids for education. My wife had been homeschooled all the way through. I had done public school all the way through. And we wanted something that was neither one of those in its entirety. And so we were looking for what is the answer to this. And at the time, College of the Ozarks was starting School of the Ozarks, classical at the time, only 9 through 12.
Right.
It's since become a K through 12. And so as that was opening up, really felt an opportunity to apply for that, to consider teaching in a high school. I thought it had been college, and as I was awarded this opportunity to be able to teach at School of the Ozarks, realized how much I loved high school students, to see the way that they were changing and learning and growing. And then after 2 years, the success of that high school, School of the Ozarks decided to add the K through 6 and then subsequently 7th and 8th grade. And so we were able to kind of enter our children at 3rd grade, 1st grade, and kindergarten.
Wow.
And our, at the time, 3rd grader who started just graduated this spring from School of the Ozarks.
Oh my gosh.
And will head to college in the fall. And so just this experience of getting to teach at the school that my kids went to and to provide them a classical Christian education was so wonderful, and fell in love with classical Christian education. Continued to learn and grow and figure out what that meant. And part of that growing process really led me to some more administrative work, some of my giftings with schedules and teacher training, and ran a conference for the college. And as I did more of those things, really felt a calling that the Lord had placed on my life and my wife's life in pastoral ministry, to kind of put those things together. And so was actually really not looking to leave College of the Ozarks, but had an opportunity to apply for a position of head of school, and really felt the Lord leading us towards that. And so just June 1st started as head of school at Sager Classical Academy in Siloam Springs, Arkansas. And so our family moved, and starting a new role at a new school, but still in classical Christian education, because we believe deeply in Christian education of all kinds. And then I just love the classical Christian education foundations.
That's amazing. That's a lot. That's a lot to have happen.
Yeah, that was my fast forward view.
Yeah, in that last year, that is a lot, especially with a move and kids and different ages. And I mean, I know they're a little bit older now. You're not moving them when they're elementary, but that's a lot. Yeah. You said something that I wanted to touch on quickly, because I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the classical Christian education piece. You said you and your wife wanted to kind of find a way that would kind of meld together the homeschool experience and the public school experience, which I think is really, really interesting, because there is such a division sometimes within the realm of Christian education, where everybody kind of thinks what they're doing is the best, and not just the best for them, but the best for everybody.
Sure.
So I wanted to ask you to kind of explain that a little bit more, what you mean by that, bringing the two together, because homeschool and public school, if we were just to look at them at face value, they're very, very different right now, right? Yeah. And so can you talk a little bit about that for people? Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing for my wife growing up that we really wanted to reproduce in our own children was a distinctly Christian education. Okay. She was on kind of the early side of what did classical Christian homeschooling look like. And so that means a lot of things, and I don't think we'll have time to get into all of it, but certainly aspects like emphasizing the great books and teaching classical languages like Latin were key for us in wanting to provide that for our kids as well. But from the public school side, in my own experience, we really wanted the opportunity, not just for the typical things like social interaction and extracurricular activities, which are great, but we really wanted there to be a diversity of opinions, and we wanted there to be more adults involved in the lives of our children. And I think for a lot of families, homeschool is the right choice and a great choice. But for us, it felt like our own giftings and kind of where we were as a family, that wasn't going to be the best for us. And so how could we provide an education that put other adult godly influences in the lives of our children? And so that was something that we were looking for, was this balance of what she received in terms of the education and the Christ-centeredness, something I'd received about having good role models, of numerous men and women in my life that I felt like invested in me as a person. How could we bring the both of those things together? And so School of the Ozarks at that time was a huge answer to prayer for us, because those teachers at that institution are still friends of mine and have been such a huge influence on our kids' lives. And so it really was
the answer to prayer that we needed.
There's something about, I think, when the homeschool community, and I'm not trying to like throw anybody under the bus. I've just had numerous conversations with people, but they're very invested in the idea that only you as a parent are fully equipped to teach your children. That from the, and not, I shouldn't say only you, but when it comes to the Christianity piece of things. Yeah. But what you said, having godly mentors for your children, yes. There's a lot to be said about that end of things, knowing that they've been vetted, that there's an accountability piece. And I like that, because I do think, not everything is perfect for everybody. Not every situation works well. Yes. So I think that's a key piece of that there are those godly mentors, but there's an accountability side to things.
Yeah, and sometimes our kids just hear things better from other adults that they don't hear from us. I think every parent would acknowledge that.
100%.
And so if you can have people in the church, people at the school that are all godly influences, you're just, I think, increasing the opportunity for your child to grow up with people they can trust and go to. And if they're mad at mom or dad, they have another godly person to go to. And that was huge for us to know that there was a lot of love and respect in both directions from our kids towards their teachers and the teachers towards our children.
That's a big deal. We only have one left now in school, in a K-12 setting. And, we've had a lot of conversations where I've said, look, I always hope you come to, Dad and I first, but should you not, there is a relief knowing that I know there is an army of people at her school now that, while they're not a stand-in for a parent, they're a good advisory board sometimes if she needs. And I also know they have the knowledge of us as well. Like, they know where we're at on things, and they, I just think there's that trust capacity, and that's huge, which I know you can build in the homeschooling community. But for the people that are like, don't send them to the K-12, don't send them out of the house. I'm like, well, but you kind of can.
And there's a lot of evidence that's coming out that what children growing up in the church really need is not just their parents. They need godly parents, but 4 or 5 adults in their life that are godly influences. And you can do that in homeschooling. You can do that in public schooling. But I feel like Christian education provides a unique opportunity to fill that gap. To provide those adults in the students' lives. And so it was a great gift to us, and this is part of being ahead of school, is moving into wanting to give that gift to other families as well.
That's amazing. I think you'll be a great asset to where you're going.
Well,
I think that's awesome, because you need the energetic outlook. You need kind of the positive outlook. You need to not be in the jaded kind of thing. I think I always ran into that too in education. So I think they're lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you.
I want to switch a little bit to your experience in DC last year when Herzog goes out there and you're surrounded by all these people, and you're in, I think DC is just I think Washington, DC is an amazing city. But specifically, what was maybe 1 or 2 experiences that stood out to you last year, just being in Washington, DC, being at an event that the foundation had put together, specifically for teachers and to honor teachers, but yet to kind of have the biblical piece there. I think if you could share a few of those that you enjoyed the most or that really made an impact.
Well, maybe if I could give kind of 2 answers that make sense and one that's a little off track, but I think will make sense. And I don't even know if it was on purpose, but I'll share it. So from the Christian aspect, hosting at the Museum of the Bible is such a fantastic idea. Incredible. It's a beautiful place. It speaks to, as a venue, what we care about. And so having the opportunity to tour the museum in the morning and then come back in the evening for the gala was just a wonderful experience. There's so much great history and beauty there. And so we really enjoyed the opportunity to go and do that. Secondly, I felt very honored as a teacher that I would be not just recognized, but treated so well, to be flown out with my wife to Washington, D.C., to stay in a beautiful place, to get to eat nice food and meet nice people, and to really be celebrated. I felt like it was done very well, and we felt very honored, which was wonderful.
I'm so
the
glad.
thing that seems a little off track was staying at the wharf. Was such a neat experience because as I was talking to some friends that lived in the area, they came up and saw us, said that he remembered when it had been kind of really run down.
Yeah.
And there was this whole idea of having been this very rundown place to then what we were experiencing, just this really beautiful venue, a place of community, and people were enjoying themselves, and lots of things to do. It just really reflects, I think, in many ways, how we can move from something that seems ruined to something that is reclaimed.
Wow.
And so I think Christian education can kind of be that model for taking something that looks ruined and to bring it back and reclaim it for God's glory and goodness. So,
well, if we've ever had that analogy going on, right, it is in our world
if that
right
wasn't
now.
your purpose, maybe it is. But it was a neat experience for us.
Absolutely.
To be thinking through it in that way.
And what an encouragement for teachers just in general, who I think are sitting in a place of sadness. It's overwhelming, and not just not necessarily Christian education, but just teachers in general. I think they've got a hard job ahead of them, and it probably does feel desolate and empty. And then what you can bring from that, especially when you start looking at things with a godly perspective, and how amazing that can be. Well, Kyle, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so very much.
Thank
and we
you.
will look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks so much.
We are so glad, in our tradition of kind of welcoming back all these different recipients of the Excellence in Education Awards. We're here today with Cheryl Crouch, who is coming to us from Texas, a proud Texan, she said, from Denton Calvary Academy. Cheryl, we're so glad to have you with us today. We appreciate you making the trip. I know Texas is a little far away from where we are today, so thank you so much for coming up. We appreciate it.
Thank you
were
for
here.
having me.
We're so glad. You were here last year up at the foundation with all the the different events. It was very, very hot. I remember that so well, how hot it was. But you had the opportunity to converse, get together with, meet a lot of the other people that had been that were also receiving this award.
Yes.
What was your experience last year when you were here at the foundation? Tell me a little bit about some of the things that stuck out in your mind, or that you noticed or appreciated. I'm trying to give people an idea of what the foundation is about when it comes to celebrating teachers.
So I think, for one thing, I was really impressed with the kind of the mission and the concept of the foundation of instead of just, let's give a whole bunch of money to one school and let that school be fantastic. The idea of equipping leaders and teachers from all Christian schools and inspiring Christian education across the nation, to me, that was a completely new thought. And I can see the value in that. And so that was very exciting to see the programs that were being launched and that were in place to help strengthen schools. As somebody who's been in a small Christian school, I could definitely just see the value of that, of leaders being well-trained, and administrations and school boards and all of that, beyond, just the teachers. And so I loved that about the foundation. It meant so much to me. It was overwhelming to me to be honored for excellence in Christian education. I think I have lots of friends in the public school sphere who have been Teacher of the Year, and that just was not a thing for Christian education. And I think I didn't realize how much that would mean to me until I got the call. And I just wept, because it was like being recognized for this. I'm passionate about it. I pour my heart and soul into it every day, and to be recognized was so beautiful. And then I think a lot of times in small private schools, there's not a lot of money. We do a lot of things. We're very aware of budget.
Sure. Yes.
And so to come out here and be treated like royalty, and to just all the little things, where it was beautiful to experience that. It was also very humbling. And I mean, I'll say honestly, I went home and just cried to my husband. I said, I don't feel worthy of this honor. I think of, in my own school, I think of other teachers who I just look up to so much and admire so much. And I thought, why am I the one that got to experience this? And then I came here, and every teacher I met I was so impressed with their what they're doing, and their creativity and their passion and their energy, and but then I finally just had to decide, I'm going to enjoy this on behalf of all the normal teachers out there who love their subjects and love their students and work really hard. I'm just going to enjoy this on behalf of those of us who are more normal.
I think that's good. I mean, it's really hard, right? You can't, when you look at the numbers and you have 12 or 13 or 14 people, well, of course we all know that there are people
there are so many
everywhere, right? So I think that's a good attitude. I think just be like, I'm going to go with it. Thank you, God.
Just enjoy it and accept it. Yeah, as a beautiful gift from God. To
to take it back, take some of those, I guess, experiences back to where you've been. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's good. But it really has been just unusually wonderful. And then to be invited back for this event right now was really sweet because it just kind of is an extra time to reflect on, I really got to do that. And that was really, really precious and really sweet.
Well, it's been a year since then. Yeah. So first of all, I guess before I even ask you anything else, tell me a little bit about, so people that are watching or listening, wherever they're pulling their podcasts from, just kind of explain a little bit about what you do as a teacher. Tell us what you teach, kind of how long, where you've been at your trajectory, I would say, as a teacher.
So I teach English. I teach 7th, 8th, 10th English, and then I oversee a senior dual credit English class. Okay. And then I teach college test prep. And so, I teach six periods at my school, which is actually not supposed to be a thing. Okay. But that's what I do.
That's what you do.
And I'm the English department head. And so, yes, I've been at my school. As a parent, I was a parent at the school for 20 years. My 4 children all went through our school, graduated from our school. Okay. I actually became a teacher at the school when we were wanting to enroll our 4th child and realized that Christian education is expensive.
It's a lot of money.
And so I started teaching there. It came with a really great tuition discount at that point.
Right.
And so but that was kind of a blessing to come into it as a mom. I understood the model. We are a university model school, so our students go, secondary go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They work at home Tuesday, Thursday. Okay. So I was very familiar with all the courses because I taught them on the home end, on those home days.
That's a huge benefit.
So it was great. Yeah. Yes. So super passionate about the school. So I think I have just finished, my 15th year as a teacher there. Okay. And I just kind of kept adding courses. I started out elementary, moved up secondary, and just kept adding classes. And but it's my passion. I love. I never thought I would be a teacher, honestly.
Okay, so that was not your background.
It was not. My major's English. My degree is English. Okay. I was a writer and author. I have a lot of published books, I felt like you shouldn't teach unless you felt called of God, because I felt that strongly about it. And then God ended up calling through the need for tuition. And then I got in there and I absolutely loved it. So I kind of came backwards, but I just absolutely love it.
I think that's how a lot of teachers within Christian education kind of get their way in, because you do. A lot of places will offer that discount. It is very beneficial.
Yes.
And I think it also gives you a unique perspective. Like you said, you know what it's about. You believe in it because you're sending your kids there. It's not just a job. So I think that's
absolutely
important. Yes. That's important. So you've been there now for 15 years then. So I was also an English teacher. Way back in the day before when my people were little. Yeah. And that was several years ago as well. And I've watched through them the transition of what English as a subject specifically has become. And now, of course, we're into this whole idea of like AI and technology. And that's very different from how I started, which I think is similar to when you started time-wise. Yeah. So tell me how you've seen it evolve and change within education, specifically as it relates to Christian education, because I think it's one of the reasons we pulled our daughter from the public education realm and moved her. And my hope was really that she would be exposed to more within English and history than she was in the public school. So I'm curious what you've seen as you've gone through each year and how it's shifted.
Yeah. So there are so many elements to that. So I think one thing I would say, what I see at our school versus what I heard and my friends have experienced in public education is there's a lack of emphasis on writing, on being able to write well. And I feel very blessed that I'm at a place where we can really we can expect great things from our kids when it comes to writing, and we can instruct well and mentor well, and just see that happen. It's fun for me. One of my biggest thrills is when my kids go to college, and I just get often emails and phone calls saying, my professor says, where did you go to school?
Oh my gosh.
You can write, you know how to write, and I just feel like, it's incredibly important because being able to write has a lot to do with how we can think and how we process thought and organize thought and convey thought. And, the whole concept of, a good man speaking well. If you have good people, but they can't articulate what they believe, but if you have, conversely, you have not great people and they're super articulate.
Right.
I mean, that's going to influence.
It's dangerous.
Yes.
I mean, it can be dangerous, frankly.
Yes.
I think I'm thinking in the realm of politics sometimes.
Absolutely.
Like, that's huge.
Yeah. So I feel like that's just incredibly important, being able to help kids communicate well. When it comes to literature, the types of things that are being read. Also, just even not necessarily morally, but just the reading level of books that are what we call Hershey bar books. They're fun and they're entertaining, and there's kind of this whole concept of, but they're reading. So as long as they're reading, who cares if it's just Captain Underpants or whatever, But I love, love, love that we're able to say, no, actually, there are some great works of literature that you are capable of understanding with guidance and with help. And these are the bedrock, concepts of Western civilization. Many of them kind of came out of these works of literature and these deep thoughts, and being able to expose students to just great works from the past, and that expands their vocabulary and the sentence structure. And I tell them all the time, yes, it's hard. It's hard on purpose. We choose difficult on purpose because just like you have to, if you want to work out your muscles, you have to do something hard. You're going to work out your brain.
That's really that's a fair analogy. I mean, when I go to the gym, which is not super frequently, but when I have gone, I'm always like, down to the 10 pound, down to the 15 pound. But if you do that consistently, you might maintain, but you never grow. Right?
Yeah.
So
you have to push.
You do, and setting those high expectations for our kids that, yes, maybe Captain Underpants is the one that snagged their attention, but now let's jump it up. And that doesn't mean we jump to Big Nate. It means we jump to something with some substance, right? It's big. So tell me now, so in English, this is something else that I've been struggle with personally, and I watch it with my friends that are teaching. I watch it with my daughter because there's been some issues I know with this as well. But let's talk a little bit about AI. I feel like I change my mind on it all the time. I feel like it's horrible, it's from the devil, and then I'm like, well, but if I just need a blurb, it's okay, right? So, and then I think, what if I use it? Someone's going to think I'm cheating the system.
Yes,
so
the fourth recommendation letter I've been asked for this week.
Like, what do you do?
Right.
And we did have a guest on with us a few months ago where we did talk a little bit about it, and he did speak about it as it's not awful because it's always the intent behind how it's being used, right? But as a teacher, your kids are always going to be looking for shortcuts. Adults are looking for shortcuts. Right. There might be a time and place for that, but how are you approaching it, and how do you address it, I guess, as a teacher, as a professional, both for your students and for your colleagues around you? What does that discussion look like?
So part of the challenge, I don't know how familiar you are with that it's really, really hard to prove definitively that it has been used. Right. And so that that is just the bane of the English teacher's existence right now, because you can suspect, and a lot of the technology that can help us says, there is a 50% chance that AI was used. Well, thank you very much, because that's where we started.
I already kind of thought, but wasn't sure.
Yeah. So. Supposedly they're getting better, so we're going to try some stuff this year to maybe help us. Part of my approach is just to tell my students, and they may or may not care or listen, but I really do tell them often. This is your brain. It is really precious. It is a precious asset you have. Don't outsource it. Don't let a robot be in charge of your thoughts. You need to be able to think real thoughts yourself. And you can very quickly let a robot do that for you, but that's your brain, and isn't that scary and sad to you that you would do that? And so I just beg them to do the hard work of using their brains, and then I try to give them opportunity by, as often as possible, having them write in front of me in class, so that I know that it's them doing it. And I've been so pleasantly surprised because they can do it.
Oh, that's
They
good.
still have the brain power, and they're writing beautiful, beautiful things for me in class, under pressure, with time. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And just realizing that there probably will be those students who choose that shortcut, just like there have always been students who have chosen to copy from their neighbor or whatever. And I do also sometimes lay it on really thick and say, this is a grade in, say, 8th grade English, like a singular grade. Is it worth compromising your integrity as a human being to get a good grade? Like think about the path that you're starting down. If you choose that now, and be a person of integrity. So
it's a hard. I really commend teachers, because English teachers specifically, because I as an adult, I just recognize that temptation.
Oh, yes.
And I try to not, but I also understand, wow, when you're really stuck. Yes, if I don't have a person right there to talk to and let's brainstorm fast. Well, but I have my phone, I have my computer. So, and if it helps me get on the right path. So I was just, I feel like it's going to be this moral
I'm
dilemma
trying to use it a little bit myself, on things that don't matter, so that I can be familiar with it.
Because you have to do that.
Well,
I think that's like anything as a teacher. You have to know what everything is around you.
But then, like you said, every time I'm like, would anybody just see me?
I know, it's a hard
delete.
It's a hard balance. It's such a hard balance.
It's a really yucky. It's a yucky thing, in my opinion, overall. But
it's kind of a hard thing, because we are just where we are with technology too. So I feel like, okay, well, now we've all kind of gone all in. It's hard to close the bottle, right? Once you let the genie out, it's hard to close. So
I'm praying that it will close before my grandchildren get to the age where. Everybody will just say enough. Let's all go off the grid.
I agree. Every so often, I'll look at my kids and I'm like, I'm not ready to be a grandma, but when I am, when it's time, I said, here's my expectation. Here's what we're gonna do. And they just kind of look at me like I have 5 heads. Set the bar now, right? Set it now.
There you go.
So when you were, I'm going to pivot a little bit. When you were out in DC, last year, what was something that kind of maybe affected you in a way you didn't expect, or something that you were surprised by, or that you got to see or do that maybe you wouldn't have had the experience otherwise without getting? Because for people that don't know, once the recipients are selected, Herzog is taking them, then they go out to the big awards dinner, and there's a trip to the Museum of the Bible, and there's a lot that happens in those 2 days. So tell me something, if you don't mind sharing, just something that when you were out there that was like, wow, that's neat, or I didn't know that, or I didn't expect that to happen.
So the first one is, in the hotel room, the coffee maker was a cappuccino machine. So that's probably not the super deep answer, but I was like,
that's a real answer. That's funny. And it annoyed my husband, actually, because he was I just want real coffee.
He wanted plain. I was super excited about that.
Yes.
So that was kind of how I knew I had arrived.
Okay, you had arrived.
But then the Museum of the Bible, I had never been to, and I was... I knew it was going to be great, but I was very pleasantly surprised by just how great it was. at the gala, when William Barr, he read the names of every recipient. And that caught me completely off guard, how much that meant to me. Again, just to feel like somebody has noticed, somebody has noticed. And that was just a really meaningful moment for me. But the whole gala was just so ridiculously beautiful. The whole weekend, everything about it, I felt so celebrated. Again, on a whole different level than than I've ever experienced. And it just felt very. I felt very spoiled, overwhelmed in a really great way.
I think that is a perfect way to say it. I mean, we've been able to go, twice now to be there and to watch, just to be around, I guess, the environment of it, and to see the connections and the friendships and the relationships that are there. But then also, I mean, it's just nice, right? Yeah. It's just a nice environment. So I'm so glad that you were able to do that. I appreciate you taking the time today to talk with us. And I'm so glad that you're able to come back, come visit new people and welcome them back in. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Next with us, we have Brooke Stewart, who is a teacher out of Texas. And I think, it's as we talk a little bit off camera, then we get back on camera, as you and I kind of talked a little bit about last year and this year, you've made some changes. So that's a big deal. So last year, as we talked with you, you were one of our I still, to this day, in fact, when I saw your name, I'm like, I totally know who that is, because you were talking a lot with us about with agriculture and education and almost business education and futures and kind of, where kids were going, but within a Christian education realm, which I know with my own daughter, when it comes to electives and extra courses and things like that, there's not a lot that's available when you're in a certain size school or smaller school, things like that. So you were really, you really caught our attention with that. But, it's obviously life happens, things happen. And so I was super glad to see when you were on our list to talk with again and to find out there's been some shifting going on in what you're doing as a teacher. And so if you don't mind sharing a little bit about where you were at teaching last year, a little bit within that school, and what you're doing now, because I think it's an interesting topic, and I don't think we've had someone quite like you before. Again. So
it's
2 years in a row. So here we go.
Well, I was at Victory Christian Academy in Decatur, Texas, which is just north of Fort Worth, for 4 years, and that is where I started the agricultural program. And so we get to do fun things. We teach a lot of leadership, a lot of that business, a lot of goal setting and how to reach those goals. But also we cross over and get to do things like floral design that count as art, or principles of agriculture, which is like speech, So there's a lot of those really fun things we get to do. With life changes and all the things happening, it was time for a new chapter. And so I am actually going backwards on my leap and having to go back to public school, which is so hard on my heart because I really feel called to be in Christian education. But it just kind of really highlights the fact that there's not agricultural programs and not a ton of opportunity for those types of things in Christian education. And it's mostly because people don't know about them. They don't know the value of them. They don't know how to do it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm back in public school, and I think God's called me to be there, and I think I'm going to do awesome things there. And it's a purposeful chapter in my life. But my heart is still really in that Christian education realm and in making sure these programs have an opportunity to grow and flourish.
Well, and I think when we think about it, I love that we're able to talk about this and I'm actually really sad that my husband is not with us for this, because I know he'd have 5,000 questions, right? But my heart is always thinking of public school teachers, because I was one before I left to stay home with my kids.
Absolutely.
And as I, every time I'm like, maybe I'll get back in, maybe I'll go, I already know I'm not going back to that arena. I don't have to, and I don't need to, so I don't look at it. But I look at all the teachers that are there, and I know what they're facing. And the ones that are Christians, I feel like they have that extra hard battle, right? Because
Absolutely.
they know truth and they know what's coming at them. And so when you look now to what you're about to head into, because it is going to probably feel like a little bit of a battlefield, I would guess. How are you like fortifying yourself? What do you anticipate is going to be the tough challenge? I mean, I know what I would answer, but I'm always curious to talk with people and to never assume like you're not taking the easier path, in my opinion, based on what you just said.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's going to be a hard thing. So
Yes.
how are you planning to approach that as a Christian, knowing where you've been and where you are now? What will you
So
be
I
thinking?
think, my time teaching in Christian education has changed my faith completely and developed it and made it. I am just a completely different person than I was before. I started in public school, then went to private Christian ed, and then I'm going back. So just that transition back is hard, and it's things that we don't think about in Christian ed anymore.
Like what? Tell me some things.
Once you take the
Take that
leap,
leap.
it's like you can take a deep breath. And so in going back, it's just
Tell me some of those things. Like what's
tiny things like you don't know where the boundaries are, and then it hits you that you have to have boundaries.
Okay.
And then that hurts your heart because that's exactly why you go to Christian education, because those boundaries are what holds us back from sharing the love of God and creating disciples. So in going backwards, I'm having to think through everything I say and everything I think and the items in my classroom. I just moved into my new classroom and I'm like, oh my goodness, in public school, the first time I had written Bible verses on the backs of all my posters that were hanging on the walls, and nobody knew, but I knew, and God knew they were there, you know, and I was creating that space for my students. Well, then I go to Christian ed and I can shout it from the rooftops and write it all over the walls and all of these things. Well, now I'm moving back in and I'm like, oh my goodness, I wonder if this is acceptable.
Okay.
You know, I wonder if is this going to offend somebody? And am I really worried about offending somebody?
Right.
But I have to be, you know? And so it's very hard on the heart. And it's, you know, I kind of wonder why God put me back in this position, because it is something I had to pray and pray and pray about and pray about this move and pray about this change and pray about this chapter. And I do feel like it was very, the path was paved for me to be where I'm going, which I never in a million years would have expected. So in that, I'm already learning. You know, and so I do believe that someday I'm going to be led back to Christian education and there will be more opportunities for my line of business. And I feel like I'm going to have a greater appreciation for a lot of these little things and maybe a different outlook for those teachers that are trying to switch or that are feeling the weight of the world in public education, you know, that I can kind of see it from both sides. And I'm strong enough in my faith and in my teaching philosophies that maybe I'll be able to help those other teachers that are going through the same thing.
Well, I think that's a lot of it, right? Is being kind of, you know, we hear a lot the idea, you know, being salt and light, right? And a lot of people talk about putting their kids into public school to be the salt and light. And I think that's nonsense. I mean, I've consistently said, like, you don't put a third grader in to be salt and light, not to be like, yes, they can be, but that's not their purpose. They're 8. Like, you don't do that.
Right.
But as an adult, I think there's a lot of value to having strong, comfortable, confident Christians in teaching positions who know who's really on their side and how to push forward. So I think it's an interesting place to be because, you know, I do tiptoe around a lot of my friends that are Christians in education because I don't want them to think I'm, you know, like pounding, like, you shouldn't be doing that, because there's a lot of kids that are there and they need people who know who know truth, who know God. And so I think that's a great place for you to be. And I would almost say, like, maybe it's not backwards, right? Like, maybe it's not. Maybe this is just the new branch of the new path, right?
And it's so hard for me to accept that, you know, because I love Christian ed. Like, I love what I did when I was in it, and I love what I'm going to do someday in the same realm. So it's a hard kind of pill to swallow. And, you know, through prayer and support from my family and the encouragement here, I'm excited to see how it's developing the next chapter, you know, and in doing this. And, I really do feel for those Christian educators that are in public schools, and I can kind of see it in a different light now. So it's like teaching it, I hope I get to be that missing link to help Christian educators in public school.
Right.
Learn how to be Christian educators.
Well, I think this is reality. I mean, it's reality. Christian education, Christian schools, they struggle. They're just going to struggle financially. They're going to struggle academically, trying to find people to fill the jobs. I mean, I know our school has multitude of job openings that are available because it's hard to make the payroll switch, right? To lose that salary, to have that come down, to view it as a ministry versus a profession. There's a lot of different ways to look at things. So I think it's a conversation that has to be continually had. And I know I'm sure you will find people as you get into it that are in that same boat. One thing you said, that caught my attention, and I think it's interesting based on what you're saying now. Last year, you were interviewed by The Lion, which is one of our publications that the Herzog Foundation puts out, and you had said specifically that you found yourself, when you were teaching back in public school, secretly praying for your kids' hearts. And I pulled that quote, but now I think, maybe you're back in there. Now, just hearing you talk, that quote that I had written down just to mention to you, I think that's an interesting, I don't know, it's like a God moment maybe. Now you're in there, and do you think you'll wear, based on that, do you think you'll wear your faith maybe more openly than maybe if you were secretly praying and this was before you were in public education? Do you think there's a way to do that now that will allow you to be more?
The way you live and the way you interact with people is very telling. I mean, that's kind of at the core of our values. And so I think that I see that more now than ever, and I understand that more now than ever. So being in the classroom, we can still take all of these innovative ideas, and we may have to package them differently, but we can still be the light,
Absolutely.
And those kids need it too, So in our area, I'm close to DFW. There's lots of Christian schools in DFW, but we're on the more rural end of things. There's not lots of options.
Okay.
So if the few that are there are not an option for that family, then their options are homeschool, which not everybody's able to do that just yet, or public school. So some of these kids are there as a default.
Sure.
So they don't have those opportunities. So I'm glad I get to be that. And I hope that, in lots of areas, it's becoming an option. And Christian education is becoming an option. And it's not there yet in Texas. We're getting so close.
Right, yes.
And so I'm excited for those opportunities for those kids. But until then, I hope that I get to be a little piece in bridging the gap, even if it's just for the students in my one public school.
Thank you, Brooke, so much for taking your time to talk with us today, and hopefully sparking some conversations for anybody that's watching or listening, because these are real struggles. We're human. You have to do what's best for your family, do what's best for your job, do what's best to honor God. And so I thank you for being honest and sharing, even though I know it feels a little awkward.
I know it does.
So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
When I saw this name on my list of people I was getting to talk to this morning, I was beyond thrilled. We are speaking now with Janelle Roop, who is with North Cobb Christian School out of Atlanta, Georgia. And Janelle, I know that I don't even know if you remember, but I remember specifically when you were here with us last year, you were like a prayer answer for me, because I had been talking with some friends, and my husband, my daughter is just going to be 15. And, it's kind of a crazy time with all the conversation. And you were an answer to prayer because, as we look at everything that's happening and trying to look at things biblically, when we talk about tough topics like sex education, that's a tough thing to tackle in a way that doesn't come across as so puritanical it's crazy, or so permissive that it's crazy. You have to find that middle ground. And so we had been having a lot of conversations, and then I was like, please God, just help me out. And then in you walked last year. I was like, God is awesome. This is amazing. And so it really struck a nerve, and you've always stuck in my head since then, because you have the unique position of having been in a place where you got to create a curriculum for the topic specifically of health and sex education. And so I know we only have a short amount of time to talk with you today, but for people that maybe are not familiar with you, will you share a little bit about a tiny bit of your background and how you got to where
Yes.
you are today, because bringing these worlds of health and sex ed and Christianity that's big. So if you could share with people what you do, because it's encouraging that something like this exists for people.
Yeah, so I was a nurse by degree and profession, ended up in nursing education with the Pregnancy Resource Center, specializing in sexually transmitted disease and infection with an abstinence base, educating in public schools and Christian schools, junior high to college, and started recognizing there was a need for a program that had a good why, specifically in Christian schools. And so when my kids, we enrolled them in Christian education about 7 years ago, made a switch from public to Christian. And the principal had heard about my background and kind of asked, hey, we're looking for something that would be holistic on identity and sexuality for middle school students. And so I started helping them look. And there wasn't a lot of great resources that really started at where God started, Genesis 1, and carried that theme through Scripture and just was so biblically based. And so I called a Christian anthropological worldview program. It's called Remember Whose You Are, and we root identity and sexuality in the gospel. And in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and Genesis 3, and in belonging, so looking at the who and the why of God and why what he says matters, moving to the who and the why of humanity, then the who and the why of me. And then how does that flesh out in relationships in terms of marriage and sexuality? And it's been a joy to watch it grow at our own school at North Cobb Christian, but then it has slowly just continued to, actually with no marketing yet, just word of mouth, snowballed. And we just picked up our 9th school across the nation. And it's been exciting to see what God's doing, I think, for such a time as this.
When you say that you picked up your 9th school and you're creating curriculum and programs, what does that look like for the schools when they, nothing's free, right? So when they purchase your program, when they purchase your curriculum, what comes with that for an administrator or a teacher or somebody that's listening to this? What does that involve? Like,
That's
what do they get?
That's a great question. So the way we use it at our school, it's a 4-unit program, and it does come with a curriculum guide. It comes with lesson plans that are fully fleshed out for the days. It was initially designed, each unit, for a 5-day, 45-minute class.
Okay.
And then it comes with Google Slides. It comes with a teacher prompt. It comes with some pre and post assessments for kids. So it's really the whole kit and caboodle. At our school, we use it at Unit 1 in 5th grade, Unit 2 and 6th, Unit 3 and 7th, Unit 4 and 8th.
Okay.
And that gives us some repetition to the material, which is really great for kids, right? And for learning. Other schools, there's flexibility to it in terms of how you want to use it. You could use it as 4 straight weeks. I just worked with a school here in Kansas City recently and developed an 8-week program for them, taking those 4 units, but just kind of stretched out and allowed more time for some good discussion, good assessments. I'm very excited about that program because it's now, an 8-week specials program. So there is kind of some set things that can be purchased, but I also kind of help work with schools identify what is your culture, what is your need, and how can we help come alongside of you. And we also do, and then I do some professional development for teachers just to give them language on how to speak on these topics, especially in that middle school, high school. But we see this even trending now into lower school with kids and what they're exposed to. And so just giving teachers language on how to engage in a biblical mindset over these topics.
Where do you see this, or where do you hope this goes? I mean, obviously it'd be nice to be like in every school and every shelf, what's your, if you have like kind of that next step vision, because you could have this curriculum and have topics for days.
That's
given like
it's almost
given
like
this
a little
current,
ADD in terms of ideas right now. I'd love to see us get some high school opportunity courses going as well, just to go deeper on some of the topics, because within the time frame and the developmental age of middle school, you don't go as deep. So I have that vision as well. I think there's a lot of good resources for parents out there that already exist, a lot of good resources for the home. But I think just making sure that we're committed to Christian schooling and just really helping support them is important. I for sure would love to see it grow. I really have just prayerfully brought that to the Lord and just said, whatever you would want to do with this. I certainly have a passion for it. And I think as we give that curriculum too, we offer training for the teachers too that are going to teach it. So that's another thing we encourage too, is just getting other people to be able to have that passion and again, the language as well, because I could just video it and you watch a video. But I desire to see the church really be equipped in a way to make disciples even in the ideas of identity and sexuality.
That's a really, I think that's actually a really profound piece of it, is that it is in the home, but you do want to have support from the church.
Absolutely.
You do want to have support from the school, and you want it to be, I mean, as a parent, I want it to be, what's the word? Cohesive. You know,
totally.
I don't want there
messaging.
to be, right.
Yes.
I don't want there to be discrepancies. So I think that's a big deal. Would this work in a church? Like if youth groups wanted to try to utilize this, is this something that's adaptable?
So that is one thing we've been exploring, is some not-for-profit ministries, some that are maybe dealing with people who've come out of trauma, and or a youth group. If they were committed to putting in the time, I think that it's not just a one-time conversation, which frankly it shouldn't be. So, but if a church would be committed to that, this is something I think could actually be incorporated there as well.
Well, it's so easy to see. I mean, one thing that Herzog does when they get all these applicants for this Teacher of the Year, these recipients, they're always looking for innovation. And I think this fits the bill 100%, right? When you were then here last year, or when you went to DC, when you were able to be out there, what Herzog is doing is just, I guess I'd call it groundbreaking. It's different. It's unique, especially with the way that they're bringing people together. So how do you see what Herzog is doing kind of as a benefit for something like for programs like what you're doing? How do you see those two being together, kind of coming together, symbiotic?
It's been awesome ever since last year. Just the networking opportunities has been great. And again, of course, these topics fit into everybody's kind of wanting something like that. So it's been, again, for such a time as this, that it's been really great. And Herzog just does everything excellently, and with such vision that is clear, and they put the right people in the right places. And so it's been such a blessing to just develop that connection. And in fact, as I talk to other schools that have called through either ACSI or CISA, different connections we have, I always say, hey, are you aware of the Herzog Foundation and what they're doing? Because to me, as much as Herzog's been a benefit for me, I want to help support their vision as well, because I really wholeheartedly believe in it and what they're doing. And I agree, groundbreaking is a great word for what they're doing.
I love it. I think every day Chris and I are kind of like, just how are we even getting to do something like this? Like you said, for such a time as this, because there's did not envision this 15 years ago, and so it's an amazing place to be, on the edge of a lot of things that I think are necessary and important in our world. And I thank you so much for giving your time, not just last year but this year as well, to come back and share with others and continue to be a light for those around you with the topics that you're talking about, because they're heavy and they're deep, and so it really just means a lot. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Christine. It's been a pleasure.
When getting to talk with different teachers that have been recipients of the Excellence in Education Award, it's been so fun to talk with people all in different areas. And today, our last wrap it up for our episode today that we're talking with is Ashley Skinner, who is from Iowa. She comes to us from Grandview Christian School, and she has been an English teacher for a long time, helps with curriculum. We did not get the chance last year to talk too much with you, especially within the podcast. So I'm excited to have this opportunity today. So thank you so much for being with us.
Me too. It's a huge honor.
It's awesome. I love this piece of Herzog with their training, specifically when they are bringing people back or they, go to different areas. But one of the things I love is the community aspect that looks like it's being created. And I remember specifically last year sitting in a lunch with a lot of teachers, and knowing full well there were going to be connections and relationships formed based on those the get-togethers, the lunches, the train, all that kind of thing. What has your experience been with Herzog from that piece last year, from that moment to this year?
Yeah, well, I think just even being invited back again to be able to meet some of the new award winners this year has just been a huge honor, and the connections that I'm making there has been phenomenal. Awesome. And just becoming a part of the Herzog family in general has just made me so much more interested, since receiving the honor, interested in what Herzog is doing even on a national level. My superintendent is one of the people that's taken all the leadership trainings, and he's very involved in Herzog. And then I have a couple friends that won the Herzog Excellence Award in the past, one this year, and then won the first year. And so that has been just really neat. It's broadened my mind, I think, to some greater needs in Christian education as a whole. And I've just been, thankful for Herzog on a greater level since receiving the award.
What would you say are maybe is a need within Christian education that has not quite been met, or that is getting, I think, more attention than it has?
Yes. Oh, I've got this one. Bring it on.
I don't want to give you the trick question.
One. No. This is a great one. So I think a huge need right now in Christian education is a result of people leaving public schools and coming to Christian education, but not having necessarily the biblical worldview training on how to teach in a Christian school. That is a huge need. Just so many friends that went to public universities, got their education majors, and then taught in public schools, which is, amazing. And there's nothing, lesser, they're still awesome believers, but then coming to a Christian school, and it is so different. And not just the culture, but being in charge of a classroom and being asked to, let's say from an English perspective, read a novel, and then having these 20 kids in front of you and being responsible now for showing them, how does this novel, how can we find a biblical worldview in here? It's such a, you just have to be trained to do it, and unless you have the resources or the person pouring into you that will help you do it, then there are so many missed opportunities that I guess it's a concern that I have, and as we have these waves of, Christian schools getting bigger and teachers, coming into the Christian schools, I want to see the culture of those schools being strengthened. And it's just a slippery slope where then, these public school teachers just need that training. And I'm trying to make sure that I don't paint it as they're lesser teachers or lesser believers. They're not. And I'm so thankful for the excellence that my public school friends have brought to, the various Christian schools. I just see a need for that training, of people to help them.
That is, that help. I think, speaking as a parent, I've subbed in my daughter's school where she's at now, and it's very nerve-wracking to go into that not having been trained in that realm. I would 100% agree with you, because I don't even think sometimes when you have teachers coming in that are Christians that they might know a lot. They have a lot of information, but it's kind of pushing all that together that I think is hard.
Yes.
But you start making a few missteps here and there, or you maybe don't have your foundation as solid as you need, and that can become a really slippery slope. So I think that's, I think it's really important. Not just for schools to be looking at who are the families coming in, but who are the teachers coming in, because
huge.
You want to give opportunities to people. I mean, I think I'd be a pretty good teacher if I were to walk into a classroom, but there's a lot that I would need to know and to either teach myself or have taught or take training, things like that. I think, I just think that's an important concept and a really important idea, and definitely an area where I think Herzog is working hard to come up with different trainings and things like that for the teachers specifically, and definitely maybe if they're listening to this, if that's not fully on their agenda, it's something that could be.
I hope
for
so.
Sure, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I really hope so.
Need it. So when you also talked about English, so talk for somebody, pretend there's somebody sitting here that has no idea what you mean when you talk about biblical worldview and reading a novel, and what's the difference, and why can't I just read it with the mentality that I have as a human in our world? Why do we need to look at things with a biblical worldview when it comes to English and reading the current novel that's in, I don't know what novels you teach, but Can you share a little bit about that
absolutely.
for somebody?
Yes. So a novel that I'm hoping that I can introduce to my classroom next year, just for this reason, is The Phantom Toll Booth. If you've heard of the book
I've
and
read it.
seen the movie
Yep.
from the 60s, it's such a great book. And I love even how it opens, where there's this kid who is apathetic about everything. Nothing excites him.
Even
You
the
know,
cover is like,
I know. It's just, the doldrums and everything is just blah. But that book is such a great example of a book to read to, I teach 8th grade, so I'm excited for it to be in an 8th grade classroom, because then you can show them what is it like to imagine the solution to the doldrums of our life without the Lord. Because the problem with this main character is he feels nothing. He's not excited about anything. So he gets transported to a world where it's kind of the same, right? But the reason why it's that way is because rhyme and reason have been taken out. And everyone, as he travels throughout this fantasy world, everyone's feeling this because there is no rhyme and there is no reason. And it's fascinating to me from a believer's standpoint to have kids read that without the Lord. Because if you're sending your child to a public school, what's the message that you're then, what your kid is getting? Is that the solution to my problems, my life in the doldrums, my, I'm not educated. My motivation for everything is, logic, right? Logically, I should be. So that's like an agnostic's Pilgrim's Progress almost.
That's
like,
interesting, yeah.
If someone were to write a journey through life and then to end up in this, celestial city, it would be, then rhyme and reason are the queens of everything.
Right.
So I'm just so excited to read it and then to hopefully open, our students' eyes to, guys, we got to be careful about this in our culture. And really what it is just an absence of the Lord. And that's one of my big concerns with a public school education in general is you just get into your mindset of this is academia and this is this part of my brain. This is excellence in education. And then this is the Lord and he's on Sunday or my Wednesday night youth group. And I don't mesh those together. But it's such a difference, right? Of this is Jesus as my savior, but this is Jesus as my personal savior. And that comes out in the books that we read. We read Tom Sawyer, same sort of thing. Tom doesn't have a dad, guys. Have we talked about that? Like we talk about the racist element, maybe of that day, pre-Civil War, but do we talk about the fact that he doesn't have a dad and a mom? And look at what's happening to this guy as he tries to find his purpose.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a father figure. Can we talk about that for a little bit? And that's what you can do in a Christian school.
That's incredible. And I think if that's not an advertisement for somebody to be like, I need to look at some other opportunities.
Yeah.
That's a great one. You also have a unique story, I think, if I'm remembering my information correctly.
Yeah.
Your family has been part of the school that you're at for a long time, like multi-generational, right?
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. My great-grandparents got married. Actually, my great-grandfather had a crush on my great-grandmother, and he kept asking her out, and she said, he wasn't a believer. So she said, you can invite me to church. And so he went with her to church and he actually became a believer and they got married. But this church started a Christian school when their kid, my grandmother, was a little bit older. She had gotten married, and my grandfather, who was also attending that school, was on the deacon board, and the pastor had said, let's start a school. So my grandfather was a part of kind of that in the initial starting of the school. And then just kind of down through generations, sometimes people have attended the school, sometimes they haven't. But now that I'm back teaching at that school, it's been neat to kind of point back to, man, the faithfulness of my great-grandmother saying, I kind of like this guy, but it's important for him and I to be aligned, biblically, has then trickled down to now my kids who are attending this school, and my mom taught there too. But I just like being able to point back to those little moments of faithfulness and then seeing now the impact that has been created from that. I'm just thankful for it, right? It's a reminder for all of us. I talk to my kids about it in 8th grade. Hey, listen, it matters who you date. Generations down the line, this is affecting
there was a time,
me.
Yes, it totally matters.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think that's just a neat, unique piece of where you don't necessarily know that God is working, but he is. And, to trust it even when you necessarily don't see it. But now you can look back and say, wow, that's incredible. Yeah. I love that. When I read that, I thought, I want to ask about that a little bit. Yeah. One thing I talked about earlier, I was talking with one of the other recipients, and it's the last thing I'll ask you because I know I want to take up a ton of your time today, but advancement of AI. I was talking with Cheryl a little bit about this.
Yes.
And as a parent now of a high schooler, I'm watching it as somebody that is invested in some writing and, reading and content, things like that.
Yeah.
I'm always torn. I go back and forth. If it's easy to kind of encapsulate a little bit, it's probably not, but if you can try, what are your thoughts on AI with regards to writing, to English, kind of our culture in general?
Man, I know
it's a hard thing too.
I know, and I'm so interested to step back and see just even training on this in the future, because I don't feel like there's a lot out there. People aren't saying a lot on how do we use it in the classroom or not. So,
or if you do, or
Yes.
like and a lot of people hate it.
I know.
Or they love it. And I'm wondering about that middle piece. So I was curious if you have had to do much with it.
Well, I think the first step is to acknowledge that it's not going away, and this is the culture that our kids are growing up in. So it's important to, I'm not saying embrace it, but I think it's important to talk to them about it. And then I guess it's forcing me, I think, to major on the majors. As I think about my own assignments as a teacher, it's been forcing me to think, can they find the answer to this on AI? Or is this something where I'm going to recognize it, even if it is turned in? And I think I would, because obviously there are a lot of things that...
Eighth grade writing and terminology.
Yep. But, in full disclosure, I have used it a couple of times myself, and like, hey, I need 10 sentences on... I don't know, Herbert Hoover, and I want there to be a direct object and a direct object and a prepositional phrase. But I think going forward as an English teacher, one way I'm going to be approaching it is, well, I guess I'm still trying to decide now that I say that. Do I want to then even mention its existence and then encourage them to use it in a small scale, or then am I opening up this big Pandora's box?
Right. It is, but I think when we talk about biblical worldview, when we talk about our brains, when we talk about human thought versus non-human thought, it's such an interesting thing. And I thought, well, I'm just going to ask, just because I don't know right now fully. I'm sure there are people that believe there is an absolute right answer or an absolute wrong answer. I don't know that I believe that. And so I'm always interested in that conversation
and I've been
people.
Curious about analysis, if it would be good to type in open-ended questions and then to have students analyze the responses. But I don't know, with the level that I teach of student, I feel like when I introduce them to something, then they just want to play with it. So I've been scared to bring it in, especially live in the room, because then if I say, hey, what's the problem with, or what's a biblical worldview of Tom Sawyer, then it's just going to be take it down, this rabbit hole. So
absolutely.
I don't know. I guess even as I'm thinking back to your initial question, I wish I had a better answer.
No, I don't know that there is one, but I think it's an interesting topic, and we've had guests on talking about it as well. Like I said, I know my daughter, and Cheryl actually earlier when we talked with her mentioned that they've had to do a lot more writing in class to avoid the temptation.
100%.
And I think
I'm on board.
There's nothing wrong with that, obviously, at all. Getting that from head to hand. So I was just curious on your thoughts.
I actually have been doing that. I'm glad she mentioned that, because I have been doing that, trying to do less writing outside of the
classroom. Well, and who complains about that too, right?
I know. And they need to get away from their screens anyway. We're too addicted to those.
Absolutely.
So I love anything that is not technology for homework.
An inadvertent effect of trying, figuring things out.
Yes.
Well, I very much, Ashley, appreciate your time today. I'm so glad we had the chance to speak with you in person more this time. Glad you're able to come back, and so glad you've been able to be a part of what Herzog Foundation is doing right now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I really want to say thank you again to those 5 teachers that came and that spoke with us. As you can listen, or as you were listening, it's really obvious to see how God has been moving continually with them. And that is something that we really strive, as we talk with you here on Making the Leap, we really strive to share that with teachers. Not everything stays the same. There's a lot of movement. God works all, through everything. And so we're so glad to be able to bring that to you. Thanks again for listening. Download, subscribe, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We appreciate it so much, and we'll see you next week. Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. We'd love your feedback by rating us and commenting on the show.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Making the Leap.